During Hollywood's golden age, the biggest stars often had the darkest secrets. On his deathbed, a star whose rugged good looks and commanding presence once lit up the silver screen makes a shocking statement. Victor Mature brought Samson to life and was a giant in both biblical epics and classic film noir. He spent his last days blind and cut off from the people who used to love him. But it wasn't the darkness that was making it hard for him to see. That was the worst thing. It was much worse, and he had been carrying it around in silence for decades. What could make a famous person in Hollywood suddenly tell a terrible secret after keeping it between them for so long? Was it the guilt that had been following him around since the beginning of his fame? Or maybe the strange family disaster he had hidden behind his fame and glamour? And why did his health get worse so quickly after he finally let go of his guilt? That was before Victor Mature became. He was just Victor John Mature, but everyone knew him as the ruggedly good-looking star whose name would be on movie mares all over America. Born in Louisville, Kentucky, on January 29, 1913. Victor was born to a Swiss father who ran a local knife business. His childhood was not filled with glitz and glamour, but with tough love and work. When he wasn't acting, those hands that would later show Samson's strength learned how to be disciplined by cutting and polishing blades with his dad's shop. Few people would have thought that this son of immigrants would grow up to be one of Hollywood's most famous leading men. The first stop on his journey was a short time at the Kentucky Military Institute. It was at the Pasadena Playhouse in California that he found his real calling. But it was there that Mature's natural charm started to be shaped into something the camera could not resist. But Hollywood doesn't just let anyone in. Before his big break, Mature did a variety of weird jobs like selling refrigerators and plastering walls. But he always had bigger dreams than the small paychecks these jobs gave him. When they finally paid attention to him, they saw something that millions of people would soon love. An up-and-coming main man whose mere presence drew attention before he spoke a word. 1940 was the year when things changed. As the ancient hero Tumac in the year 1 million BC, Mature jumped onto the screen with a body that looked almost supernatural. Instantly, the man who used to sell refrigerators became a huge star overnight. His strong build, those chiseled features that looked like they were cut from stone, and his commanding screen presence made him stand out in every shot. These were the things that made Mature a huge hit right away. During the 1940s, he took advantage of this popularity by appearing in a string of hits at the box office. Not only did his impressive looks shine through in movies like My Gal Saul, 7 Days Leave, and I Wake Up Scream, but he also showed off his surprising range as an actor, able to handle both romance and drama with equal conviction. The biblical epics, on the other hand, gave him the most famous parts. As Samson in Cecil B. Deal's play Samson and Delilah, he played the famous strongman with such conviction that many people could not imagine him without the role. Because of how well the movie did, he became a Hollywood legend and went on to star in other historical plays, such as The Robe and Demetrius and The Gladiators. With these movies, Mature went from being just a star to a figure of strong, brave men that spoke to people in America after World War II. What made Mature's rise even more interesting was how self-aware he was. Mature was surprisingly humble about his skills, which was different from many stars who believed their own myths. He was known for avoiding praise by making fun of himself and saying he had 64 pictures to prove it. Not taking himself too seriously made him likable to both co-workers and fans, giving what could have been a one-dimensional matinee hero more depth. But there was something even more amazing about Mature that set him apart from many of his Hollywood peers at the time. Something that showed the real man behind the heroic roles he played at the height of his fame, when most actors would have been clinging desperately to their one big hit. But that will forever define his memory beyond the screen. While his face was selling out, Victor Mature loved his country more than any other play in America. During World War II, he did something that not many stars would have dared. He left the press when he was at the height of his fame to join the U.S. Coast Guard. This wasn't a publicity stunt that a company planned. It was a real act of patriotism from a man who put service ahead of fame, serving in the South Pacific with honor. Mature went up to become chief bosun's mate. His fellow soldiers didn't see a movie star. They saw a committed Coast Guardsman who told them about the dangers and difficulties they were facing. Aged this wasn't acting like a hero. It was being one, away from the cameras and the cheers. His work in the war showed what was really going on behind the image, a patriotism that came from his deepest values and deeds, not from his public persona or performance. After the war, when he went back to Hollywood, Mature was different. He started acting again, but there was a new way he was going about getting famous and rich. He stopped being satisfied with just being hired as a worker. He started looking for more creative freedom and business possibilities in the field he had dominated. By the 1950s, this change had led him to start Romina Productions with United Artists and Batjack Productions. The second one was started by the famous John Wayne. In movies like China Doll, Mature made the switch from acting to producing. In Kali, this project, he played two parts, one in front of and one behind the camera. There was more to this change than just business sense. There was a sign that Mature wanted to take charge of his job and stop being just a hired body and face. He talked about big plans for future shows like The Incurables and Vaults of Heaven. Even though not all of these projects would come together, in the end, they showed how determined he was to make his own way. The Western theme was also a good fit for Mature's skills. In the United Artists movie Escort West, he played the classic cowboy who has to deal with the moral problems of the country. He was a natural fit for the genre because of his rough look and strong presence, which added to his versatility as an actor. Timbuktu, a French Foreign Legion adventure that took adult people to the dramatic landscapes of North Africa, was another important project from this time. Under the direction of Jacques Tour, he played a character who had to deal with the dangerous tasks of the Legion. This showed once again that he could do well in a variety of genres and settings. Mature had a good relationship with director Irwin Allen by the late 1950s, which led to his role in The Big Circus. He got to experience the colorful world of circus performers through this big project, which added to his already amazing range. Mature showed that he could convincingly play any part that producers came up with, from war hero to cowboy to circus performer. His filmography kept growing with roles like The Bandit of Zobi and Hannibal, the title role in the Italian Peplum film, in which he played the famous Carthaginian general with his usual intensity. His work with Orson Welles on The Tartars made his connection to historical epics even stronger. This style had come to define much of his career. Yet, even though Mature was still having success and seemed to be able to do many things, something was changing within them. At age 46, he made a choice that shocked a lot of people in the business. He was going to stop playing. When asked about this choice later, he told me in his usual honest way that it wasn't fun anymore. He said he was going to become a professional loafer because he was rich and maybe tired of the Hollywood machine. But even when he wasn't in front of the cameras, Mature's personal dramas kept happening, showing a man who was much more complicated than the roles he played on TV and in movies. Victor Mature had a persona that was bigger than life, but underneath, that was a man who was always looking for connection and friendship. His personal life was just as interesting and varied as his acting parts. He was married 5 times, which shows how he changed as he became famous and wealthy. His first marriage to Frances Charles was the start of his journey to find a balance between the expectations of fame and the need to be happy in his own life. The public record doesn't have many details about this relationship, but it was his first attempt to balance his public image with his private happiness, which would be hard to do for years. Mature then married Martha Stevenson Kemp, who was already well known in the entertainment business because she had been married to famous big band leader Hal Kemp before. When Hal died in a car accident in 1940, Martha had her own close call with disaster. This may have given her a unique understanding of how fragile life is, despite the glamour of show business. Even though they had the same point of view, they couldn't stay together forever. His third marriage to Dorothy Stanford Barry was another step in Matcher's search for security. Dorothy wasn't a famous person, but she became a part of Victor's more complicated love life. Like his other relationships, this marriage showed how he was still looking for mental stability in the often lonely life of fame. His fourth marriage to Adrienne Ervik was another attempt for him to find real connection in his busy life. Even though it was only a short time, it was another step in Mature's long-term search for something real and permanent that goes beyond the fakery of Hollywood. Not until his fifth and last marriage did Mature finally seem to find what he had been looking for all along. He married Loretta Sabina in 1974 when he was 61 years old. She would be by his side for the rest of his life. They were married for more than 20 years, until Mature's death in 1999. This suggests that he had finally found the security and companionship that he had been looking for in 4 previous marriages. Victor and Loretta had a daughter named Victoria Mature. She would become an opera singer, like many of her family members who were artists. Victoria's job choice was similar to that of her mother, who was a trained opera singer. This created a beautiful continuity in the family's creative legacy that went beyond Victor's contributions to film. In addition to his marriages, Mature had relationships with some of Hollywood's biggest and brightest stars. He was engaged to screen beauty Rita Worth for a short time before she married director Orson Welles. This short-lived romance with one of the era's most famous beauty queens showed that he was an adult in the eyes of Hollywood royalty. They were also going to marry. Anne Shirley was an actor who was famous for roles in movies from the 1930s and 1940s. These high-profile relationships added another layer to Mature's complicated life story and made him look even more like one of Hollywood's most alluring main men, on and off the screen. But as the years went by and Mature faded from public view, he would face problems much worse than the ups and downs of love. As his health got worse, a new kind of darkness would come into his life, one that would force him to face the truths he had been hiding for so long. Victor Mature, who used to be the picture of physical strength on screen, was in the middle of a much more personal and devastating fight than the ones he had played in movies as the year 2000 drew to a close. Mature was slowly losing his sight, inside the walls of his Rancho Santa Fe home, away from the people who used to watch his every move. The diagnosis was age-related macular degeneration, a disease that slowly destroys center vision, leaving only the edges of your field of vision clear. For someone whose expressive eyes had charmed millions, going blind over time was a particularly cruel turn of events. Complications from undiagnosed diabetes made this situation worse, speeding up his vision loss and putting his overall health at risk. As the night fell around Mature, he pulled away from public life more and more. The actor who had commanded the big screen with his strong presence now moved slowly through his own home, relying on memory to get through rooms that got darker every day. Friends said that he had changed a lot. They saw anger bubbling beneath the surface, sadness in quiet times, and a growing sense of being alone as his connection to the visual world grew weaker. It seemed like memories from the past were getting stronger and more insistent as he lost his sight. It got harder for him to keep up the selective forgetting that had helped him get by during his work. In the quiet calm of his shrinking world, thoughts he had pushed down for decades started to come back to him more often and more clearly. People didn't understand how brave the man who had played Samson was when he faced his own weakness. What he did every day showed how flexible and strong he was. He learned to find his way by touch, what he had once known by sight. As old ways of seeing the world faded away, he found new ones. Reading, once a simple pleasure, became impossible for him, and he had to rely on other people to keep him up to date on current events or his favorite stories. During this time, his daughter, Victoria, was his most reliable friend. She read to him, told him about the changing seasons, and made sure that even though he was losing his sight, he still had a link to life. During these years, their bond grew stronger. What the famous actor didn't expect was that his daughter, whose artistic path mirrored his own, would become so important to him. But even as Mature got used to his physical problems, the people who knew him best could tell that he was upset about something else, not just his poor health or eyesight. A rising sense of urgency made him feel like time was running out, and not just for his vision, but also for something he needed to say. As 1999 went on, this sense of urgency seemed to grow. Mature started to talk about the past more often. That is not just the good times in his work, but also the bad times. Sometimes he would stop in the middle of a sentence, as if he were about to say something important but then pulled back. People who knew him well could tell that he was thinking about something important, whether to keep a secret that had been following him around for most of his life until he died. In the last few months of that year, as Mature's health got worse, he made a choice that would add the biggest twist to a life that was already full of them. He was ready to tell the truth, no matter what, after decades of keeping quiet. What came next would surprise even people who thought they knew him well. Victor Mature made a choice in the quiet of his Rancho Santa Fe home when he could barely see anymore. This choice would be the sad ending to his amazing life story. He decided to come clean about a secret that had been bothering him since his early days in Hollywood, after decades of carefully crafting a public image. The news came out in a rare, private conversation that was meant to be used as material for a biography. Mature's voice started to shake from age and emotion, as he talked about things he had never talked about in public before. What started out as a normal reflection on his work quickly went off in a new direction. In the dark world of his blindness, memories from more than 50 years ago became suddenly very clear. There were two accounts of his confession. One of them was about a failed relationship with a young actress who later killed herself. Another one was about how the death of his younger brother was covered up while Kiss of Death was being filmed. The main point of both was the same. Vic Mature had been deeply troubled by guilt for most of his adult life. In the first story, he talked about a short but intense relationship he had with another actress-to-be when he was making his way to fame. The connection ended quickly when his agent told him to pull away to protect his image. The young woman allegedly killed herself soon after because she felt alone and overwhelmed by the pressures of the movie business. Mature had secretly blamed himself for decades, even though he had never been linked to the event in public. According to the other story, Mature said that the confession seemed to be a way for him to get away with something before his final departure while he was shooting Kiss of Death. People who heard the videos said they could feel Mature's voice lifting as he spoke the truth out loud, as if it had lifted a weight he had been carrying for decades. For a man who had made a living playing heroes on screen, being honest may have taken the most courage of all. He had to be ready to be known not as perfect or larger than life, but as a deeply flawed person. Victor Mature achieved something in those last recorded words that he hadn't been able to do in any of his other performances. He was completely and unfilteredly himself. But the news turned out to be more than just a way to ease his feelings. It seemed like a terrible coincidence that Mature's health took a big turn soon after he told the truth. It was as if the lifting of his mental burden had somehow told his body it was time to let go. Once the truth was told, it seemed to make Victor Mature's health worse faster. People who knew him well noticed that his already weak health quickly got worse in the days after he confessed. The actor who used to play Samson with such life seemed to be giving up because he was getting old and sick, and maybe in a dramatic way because he felt free after finally telling the truth. He couldn't see much of the world because he was blind. But now other services started to go down too. The diabetes that had made him lose his sight was now affecting other parts of his body. Heart disease, which had been under control for years, started to show itself more strongly, and leukemia, which had been kept secret, moved very quickly, which was very scary. Victoria, Mature's daughter, was by his side most of the time in his last days. She read him favorite books and talked about how the light through his windows changed over the day. Other times, she just sat with her hand in his and was quiet. It was a moving turn of events. The strong Samson was now reliant on the daughter's caring care. Her artistic path was similar to his own, which led him to become a performer. When old co-workers and fans heard about his confession, they came together to support and understand him. Many people who had worked with him over the years sent him words of praise for being brave enough to finally share his burden. Even though some people said they could tell there was something wrong with him, they had no idea how much pain he was in. But Mature wouldn't live long enough to fully feel this wave of acceptance and kindness. Vic Mature took his last breath on August 4, 1999, in the comfort of his Rancho Santa Fe home. The official cause of death at age 86 was heart failure made worse by leukemia. But people who were there with him in his last days thought that he had just let go after finally freeing his mind.